I'm too short to be a true forward or a center, but I've got like the box out ability. But then
Yeah,
I'm also not quick enough to be a point guard and not
yeah,
good enough of a shooter. So I'm like a middleman.
yeah. And I'm like also a three, but in the complete opposite way. I'm way taller, but also I'm just not even close to a physical player. I'm
Yeah.
That was a nice move by Pipkins, taking it right to the rack himself. Wide open three, left wing, and it's good. Nylon, the dunk likes that, Matt.
A three from the right side, and it's good! The one, Pipkins, the man, yet again.
Hello, everyone. This is Joe Howie,
and I'm Matt St. Jean.
and we'd like to welcome you to tonight's episode of The Flex, a Providence Friars basketball podcast. Tonight, we'll be continuing with our Big East preseason coaches' rankings, breaking down the number 8th ranked Butler Bulldogs. Butler comes into this season under the lead of Laval Jordan, who will be entering his 4th season with the Bulldogs. In his previous 3 seasons at Butler as head coach, he's put up a 59-40 record, but he's gone 26-28 in the Big East. Last season, the Bulldogs, under Laval Jordan, were ranked as high as 6th in the nation. To end the season, the Bulldogs were projected to play the Friars in the 4-versus-5 game in the 2020 Big East tournament before the coronavirus ended the season. They finished the 1920 season overall ranked 5th in the Big East, boasting a 10-8 conference record and a 22-9 overall record. Matt, when you think about Butler from last year, what are the 2 names that pop out to you?
I mean, it's got to be the 2 guys that they're losing, and that's Kamar Baldwin and Sean McDermott. And I mean, especially Kamar Baldwin, he's that top guy. He had those obviously those buzzer beater threes against Xavier, against Villanova. He was the team's leading scorer, and I mean, he was just clutch. He's a Big East guard right there, the type of guy you put the ball in his hands, he's gonna make a play. I mean, he really did it all. Over 16 points a game, almost 5 rebounds a game, over 3 assists. He could shoot the lights out. He could play point guard or shooting guard. He did everything you could want a guard to do in Big East play. And Sean McDermott, I mean, is just another guy who could get buckets. Double-digit points per game. As you've noted right here, Joe, he's a I'll let you say, he's a what?
A matchup nightmare, baby.
There it is, a 6'6" wing who could shoot the lights out of the building, almost a 50% field goal shooter. I mean, these are the 2 guys that led the Bulldog offense all season long.
You're right. They did lead the Bulldog offense, and Matt, I know this comes as a shock to you, as it does to many people who know me and who know how biased I am about the Big East, but there's a small handful of players that I actually enjoyed watching outside of Providence. It's Charlie Moore from DePaul, Kamar Baldwin from Butler, and Miles Powell from Seton Hall. And Kamar Baldwin, man, he was one of my favorite players to watch last season. Seeing him step back and drain a 3 right in Colin Gillespie's little face to win at Villanova was fantastic. And then, let's not forget, after our big blowout of DePaul on senior night, I'm at the Abbey. I'm with my dad, my uncle, my cousin. You know, we're sitting at the table enjoying our burgers. I've got a nice Narragansett. We're watching the Xavier Butler game at Xavier. So Xavier's up. It's the last possession of the game. And Kamar Baldwin, because he kind of played the combo, he could bring the ball up, he could play the 2. But anyway, he's bringing the ball up. Time's running out. Step back 3-pointer wins in in the Cintas Center. It was, oh my God, it was awesome. My brother and I, we were making fun of Travis Steele because we were saying that as Kamar Baldwin dribbled up the sideline past him, he was like, "Yeah, guess what I'm gonna do right now? I'm gonna win the game." But no,
and
yeah,
that's a huge game right there. That was a game that Butler needed too for seeding in the Big East. I mean, that's not a nothing game either.
And you know, the double slap to Xavier is that bumped them down to Wednesday night, where they eventually lost to DePaul. And
yeah,
it wasn't
that one
like
game would have knocked. No, that's one game that probably would have essentially knocked Xavier out of tournament contention or pretty far down the bubble had we had a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, if we had the tournament. But anyways, Kamar Baldwin, back to the Butler Bulldogs. He was one of my favorite players to watch last year. And Sean McDermott, I love this term. He's a matchup nightmare. 6'6", he's a wing forward, but you know he can play small at the 2. He could play big at the 4. He can stroke it from beyond the arc, and he's a guy that they're going to miss. Baldwin and McDermott were Butler's two leading scorers. Baldwin averaging just over 16 points per game, McDermott just over 11. Those guys are definitely going to be missed by this Butler offense, which returns no players that averaged double digits last year. So, Matt, do you want to introduce us to the three key guys that are returning for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to try to. They've got some good guys on this roster who can make up this difference. If you're looking at guard, it's Aaron Thompson. I mean, he didn't really shoot the three last year, either in volume or percentage. So he's not going to answer for Kamar Baldwin there, but he's one of the best defensive guards in the Big East, and he's a great complementary guard. He's not going to be your leader in all likelihood, and we're going to get to the guy who's probably going to do that for them in a bit. But I mean, Aaron Thompson's a fantastic player who's going to help them out a lot this year, and they're going to have some trouble scoring when you lose your best two scorers. So having a guy that's as good at the other end of the floor, and Aaron Thompson will help you a lot. And then you also have the Bryces, Bryce Enzi, Bryce Golden. Enzi, he's the wing. He can rebound. He can score. He's good around the rim. He's not really going to be a kick-out guy too much, but I mean, he's a very, very solid player. And Bryce Golden, bigger, plays down low. He's going to see his minutes increase this year. But he's a guy that played very well for Butler last year. I mean, I think all three of these guys are solid foundational players. They're not going to be what puts your team over the top, but they're going to keep you in games. They're good players, and if you can have another guy who's an impact player to complement them, then these guys will shine.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. And a note about Aaron Thompson. He did miss some time last season with an injury, which led Kamar Baldwin to run the point and play more of a combo position. But even missing time with an injury, he still led the team in assists, which I think is really notable for a point guard. He's going to be the floor general. Like you said, he won't be the team's, go-to leader, but he'll definitely have an increased role this season. I think with Enzi and Golden in the paint, 6'7", 6'9", you're going to be scoring down by the rim a little bit more this season than you did last season. The guard play has kind of been diminished with the exit of Baldwin and McDermott, so you're going to have to change your offensive style to feeding it to the post, which is a bit of a change-up for this Butler team. Again, they're going to have to rely heavily on their defense, and there are a couple pieces that are coming into the mix. Matt, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, your number one here is Jair Bolden. He's a grad transfer from South Carolina. He had also played at George Washington earlier in his career. He's never been asked to be the one or to be a leading scorer for an offense. He averaged just about eight and a half points per game last year for South Carolina, but he can shoot. He shot over 41% from beyond the arc last year. And if you can get that kind of scoring out of him for a full season, he should start for them. If he can shoot like that, if he can score like that, that frees everything up. I don't know if he can be the guy. He's certainly not Kamar Baldwin. He's not nearly as good. But if he can be 70% of what Kamar Baldwin was and just be a consistent scorer who can shoot from beyond the arc, that makes life for everybody else here so much easier.
I agree, Matt, and I think it's safe to say he's going to slide into a starting role in the backcourt very easily. But that leaves an open spot in the starting five. So LaVall Jordan, he's going to have to dig through his roster and find guys that are going to make up for the absence of Baldwin and McDermott. And those are two sets of shoes that are going to be pretty tough to fill. But
yeah,
LaVall Jordan, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk about filling those shoes, finding that extra starter. The guy you look to is Christian David, who's a veteran, but he suffered an ACL tear back in January. He will not be ready for the start of the year. So you're going to have a little bit of an open competition for that starting spot, and that can be your redshirt sophomore, 6'7" Marquise Hastings. He only scored a point per game last year, but he can step it up. I mean, there's also Bo Hodges, who's a transfer who they're hoping he'll get a waiver to become immediately eligible. We've been seeing a lot of those handed out. As of right now, he hasn't received one, but that's a senior, played at East Tennessee State, who averaged double-digit points per game last year. He's 6'5". He can come in and add somebody else. If he's not eligible, though, you're going to be asking a lot of Marquise Hastings, of John Michael Malloy early, and some of these freshmen, a guy like Jacob Coles or Chuck Harris is going to have to come in and be a difference maker right off the bat if Butler is going to start the season off strong.
Speaking of freshmen, this player is going to miss the season with a torn ACL, but I think he deserves a shout out. Carlos Johnson. His nickname is Scooby. Uh, we talked about Paulie Cap the other night. I think Carlos Scooby Johnson gives him a good running for his money for best name in the Big East. I wish he was going to play this year so then we could actually compare the two on the court, but if we're talking about Big East names, I think Carlos Scooby Johnson takes the cake here.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a fun one to say. That's one of those where I kind of want to go back to broadcasting just so you can say that on air. Yeah, I mean, and any guy with a nickname like that too, that's a lot of fun. And we haven't even gotten to a guy like Kiki Tandy from Xavier. That's another one that's a good. That one's fun. We're gonna have to come up with our Big East all-name team at some point because there's usually quite a bit of name talent and some interesting ones out there around the
I
conference.
think that's going to deserve a podcast of its own.
Yeah. Oh, Sandro Mamukalashvili, of course.
Mamu, I like him. I like him because he praised the dunk. Really,
That's
I don't
true.
like playing against him.
Yeah.
But anyway, in closing here, let's take a look at Butler's schedule as of right now. On 11/25, they host Western Michigan U. On 11/29, they host Eastern Illinois. On 12/11, they host Kansas State in the Big East Big 12 matchup. On 12/14, they host St. John's. And on 12/16, they travel for their first road game of the season to Villanova. Woof. That's a doozy of a road game for sure.
Yes.
And then after that, they return to Hinkle Fieldhouse to play Providence. Ed Cooley, he likes playing in Hinkle Fieldhouse. It is on December 23rd, so I won't say anything in efforts to not ruin my Christmas or my Christmas Eve, because we all know what the Friars did to my Thanksgiving last year. But,
man.
Matt, what do you take of those first handful of games?
Well, obviously, I don't think that's going to be it for their non-conference schedule. I think you've got about a week or week and a half gap between Eastern Illinois and Kansas State. So I think they're probably going to add a game or two in there. But it's a short, like for everybody else, it's a short non-conference. Western Michigan and Eastern Illinois, those are far from powerhouse schools. That should be 2 wins. And Kansas State is not a particularly strong team, or they're not projected to be in the Big 12 either. So that should be a winnable game at home. St. John's, I mean, that's going to be a battle of 2 of these teams that have talent and are figuring themselves out. That's going to be a toss-up. So to start off, Butler's got some opportunities to figure out who they are, but they're going to have to do it quickly because Villanova and Providence, that's 2 teams that are clearly better than the Butler team we see on paper right now. And if they want to be competitive in those games, if they want to have a chance to win those games and pull off an upset against Providence at home, then they're going to have to get themselves into gear very quickly. And you're going to have to hope a guy like Christian David can come back and really give you some help. You could step into your starting lineup at that point, or else you're relying on some big question marks to fill holes in big games.
You're right, Matt, and I really like what you said there about on paper, Butler shouldn't win those matchups. Just like on paper, Butler really doesn't deserve to be in the top half of the Big East. But, and I'm going to give a little shout out to Laval Jordan, he's one of my favorite coaches in the Big East. My hot take of the evening is I think he's the classiest coach of the Big East. You can take Jay Wright and kick him out of that spot because I don't really think he's very classy. I think Laval Jordan is the classiest coach in the Big East. He is always smiling. Coaching antics aside, when you're on your own sideline, that's a different story. But in terms of interacting with the other players and coaches in the Big East, I think by a mile he's the classiest. But anyway, as you said, on paper, Butler does not look good. Laval Jordan, he's a good coach. Butler's always a tough defensive out. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do in the early days of this 2020-2021 season. Matt, any closing notes?
I mean, I'm definitely excited to see what we've got in Butler. Obviously, you've got a transfer situation to monitor there, and knowing our luck between when we record this and when it goes out, they'll make a decision on that. But I mean, this is a team that is still looking to the future and trying to figure out what they have right now.
Agreed. And disclaimer, the schedule is subject to change by the time this is released also. So don't take it for
everything
what it is.
Everything is subject to change this year.
Yes. Who knows? Laval Jordan may not be the coach. I don't know. But anyway, for Matt St. Jean, this is Joe Howie. You can follow along on Twitter at the Flex Hoops or at Matt St. Dream or at Joe Howie. Have a good night, guys.